Even after lifting weights for a while and already laying down a solid foundation of muscle, it can still be pretty challenging to get an accurate idea of what to expect as a natural. What's actually possible?
While using secret sauce, after my workouts within just a few weeks, I started to experience drastic differences in my physique. My muscles became bigger, fuller, and my recovery time was significantly reduced.
For beginners, forget about it. You're navigating through a sea of infinite bullshit that makes it almost impossible to be able to tell how much muscle you can actually build as a natural lifter.
The question was, have you juiced? We haven't. Simple as that. I haven't. I can speak for Simeon because I'm good friends with him. I've known him. I've traveled with him. Known him quite well. I've known him quite well, and I can tell you categorically he hasn't done anything, and I haven't done anything.
In the public view, when a bodybuilder or someone that's trying to build muscle takes steroids, they lose points for effort. Even though any unnatural bodybuilder might have worked very hard to get to where they're at, steroids are still looked at as cheating by the general public. For that reason, in an effort to look more credible to the public, you have a bunch of bodybuilders that are on steroids that swear that they are steroid free and achieve their physique naturally. They're all natty, brah.
When I got to San Quentin, that's when I started to really blossom and grow, because I was eating Dunkin' sticks, honey buns, top ramen and tuna spreads, and I was huge. I was 230. There wasn't no need for no steroids. The only time I heard of somebody taking steroids in prison was at Tehachapi prison I was at.
Unfortunately, there's no 100% accurate way to be able to determine who achieved their physique naturally and who achieved their physique with steroids. Or is there? I mean, with some bodybuilders, it's clearly obvious no matter how much they claim that they never took steroids, you could tell these people were on steroids at least at some point.
If I was to use steroids, I'd be a very mild user. And I have if I had ever tried it, I would have tried it once to use a lot and didn't really notice a great deal of difference. Do you know what I mean? But a lot of women would take 4 to 5 times of the amount that I take.
Would take?
Yeah, would take.
But with many people, you just can't tell. And I think that this is a very important thing for you to determine, because it's the only way that you're going to be able to set realistic goals and expectations in regard to building muscle mass. If we're setting goals and expectations that can only be achieved with drugs, and we're not taking those drugs, then we're going to end up being very disappointed because our measurement of success is flawed. Well, luckily there is a way that we can figure out what's possible while being 100% natural, and the only real way to do that is by going back in the past.
But I'm gonna have a chance to travel through time.
To be sure that we're looking at a physique that was built naturally, we have to look back to a point in time in which steroids weren't even around. Steroids weren't developed until a little under 100 years ago. It wasn't until the late 1930s that steroids were developed. So we have to assume that any bodybuilder that we have records of before the 1930s had a natural physique. Eugene Sandow was one of these bodybuilders. He was born in 1867 and became known as the first natural bodybuilder and is now known as the father of modern bodybuilding. At only 5 feet 9 inches tall, Sandow weighed over 200 pounds, had a 48-inch chest, 30-inch waist, and 18.5-inch biceps. That's impressive for someone that had no possible access to steroids. Another strongman and boxer of the time was Charles Atlas. He was 5'10", weighed 180 pounds, and had 17-inch biceps. And the last Ironman of this age that I'm going to go over today was George Hackenschmidt. This guy looked a lot like modern day bodybuilders today, and he did it all naturally. Measurements of his upper arm were estimated to be anywhere between 18 to 19.5 inches. Those are some big arms for a natural bodybuilder. So all of these guys achieved some pretty amazing results for being completely natural. This was also during a time in which not much was known about bodybuilding. These people didn't know how to set up a bulking program. They didn't know how to set up their macros. They probably didn't even know about macros. They didn't have access to the abundance of the variety of food that we have access to today. They grew up in a time where very little was known about nutrition and fat was demonized and believed to be the cause of weight gain. They didn't have access to a local GNC or vitamin shop, yet they all got outstanding results in a time that we know steroids weren't around. So based on this, it's pretty obvious that today, with all the abundance of information available on bodybuilding and the availability of over-the-counter creatine, protein powders, and access to supermarkets stocked with all the food that you're gonna need, it's pretty obvious that you can get really far as a natural lifter. The strongmen that I used in the examples today were just a few of the many successful natural bodybuilders in that era before steroids. I see a lot of idiots making steroid accusations at people just because they have great physiques. Just because your physique isn't as good as someone else's doesn't mean that they took steroids to get there. It doesn't mean that they got there just because of naturally good genetics, even though sometimes this is the case. I think the steroid accusations are used by many people to justify why they're not in the kind of shape that they want to be in. Instead of taking the steps necessary and putting in the hard work necessary to achieve that kind of physique, it's a lot easier to just sit there and say that the only way to look muscular and aesthetic is by taking steroids. But that's clearly not the case, as I demonstrated in today's video. Many of these guys that I talked about today had very aesthetic physiques in a time before steroids and in a time with very little knowledge about nutrition and bodybuilding. Bottom line is, don't limit yourself. You could achieve a lot naturally, but you'll never achieve a lot if you set limits and boundaries in your own mind. That's it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, leave this video a thumbs up, and comment below, and I'll see you guys next time.
Pump it.